The views and opinions of the hosts and guests of Weird News Weekly may not be those of this radio network, its sponsors or affiliations. User discretion is advised. Welcome to
Weird News Weekly with
Diane Brown and
Norm Solbush.
Hello and welcome to a special Weird News Weekly. I'm Dan Brown in Nottingham and my co-host is over there in Ohio. Hi Norm.
Hello.
Oh, we have a guest, and because this show we are remembering JFK, Oswald and J.D. Tippitt, and our guest this week to talk about that is independent film producer, writer, actor, Keenan Powell.
Woo.
Hello.
Hello.
Thanks for having me back again.
Yeah, welcome to the show.
You're always welcome. And of course the big news this week was what happened in France on Friday the 13th.
It's a horrible day, you know it?
The 13th came to mind early that morning for me, and I thought to myself, I'm just going to stay home, sit in my chair, and don't do much of anything because it was the 13th. But until you just said that, I forgot about that night. It was the 13th, and, history of the Friday the 13th deals. It was sad. Sad to watch. I know it was late over there, but we were here watching that stuff live online on Sky News and CNN. It's just a mean world we live in. It's unheard of. I think a lot of people in the older generations would have probably, this would have been characterized as like a, bombing of Pearl Harbor even, I mean, it's the same feeling that people have. 9/11, is the latest, but when you have people coming into your country, whether it's France, England, hopefully England stays safe after all this nonsense.
Well, we're on full alert now.
Well, I think you should be more of alert. I mean, even though I'm a little worried about where I'm at with my situation, I think that you are probably 10 times better be more alert than me.
Yes, because, we have been involved.
Yeah.
You've got no guns over there in your house right now, do you?
No, I don't need a gun.
Well, I've got 800 rounds and 3 guns, and my wife shoots, so bring it on. That's just the American way. Bring it on, guys. You want to break into my house and start knifing me or shooting me?
Unfortunately, they've got some of the better weapons. What was it? Kalashnikovs that they used.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they've probably got better weapons than the army.
Well, we'll just see where this takes the world. We're just going to have to hope that this doesn't happen and reoccur and kill more people. In the big scheme of things, it isn't a lot of people, but it is a lot of people. I mean, you ever think about how many people are in the world? I guess people die everywhere. But these massive attacks with technology today that we're seeing, years ago, they just would have heard about this situation. Now we get to see things live. We get to hear the guns. We hear the explosions. We're 15 minutes out on news from here to there. The world's changed with social media. It's just crazy how the world works nowadays.
Well, our thoughts and prayers are with those people in France.
I noticed that people that can actually take a plane, it's like a flight from Ohio to Las Vegas to get to Paris. People go to a holiday over there. People go over there for the weekend, a long weekend.
It's about 35 minutes flight.
I mean, that's pretty damn close in my opinion.
35-minute flight. Yeah, that's from me to Chicago. I mean, that would be that kind of a flight.
It's pretty simple, I guess.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we don't stop and think about, actually, Europe is a fairly small place.
Yep.
A
lot of people never get on the map and look at it. If you look where Diane lives in the UK, I mean, here's the thing. I think UK, when people say England or UK my whole life, I was born in 59, and your whole life you hear about England. You hear about the Queen.
Yeah.
You hear about their way of life. You think it's this gigantic country. You really think, from a viewpoint of Americans back then, that England is just the whole UK or the whole European nations, you know? I mean, you think it's that huge.
Well, we was an empire, you see, because we went in and we
You had
invaded
ships.
countries.
Yeah, I know. You were an empire because you had the ships.
Yes. And we got to India and we used to trade with them, and then we decided, well, let's just take it.
But actually, I believe somebody's told me that you could take England and take it and put it in the state of Texas.
It's not as big as Texas.
Well, I've been to Texas, and I'll tell you what, Texas is huge to me as a state. But when you think of a country being that big only, that's small. I mean, you don't realize how big the United States is, the 48 United States, until you start looking at England and you go, how do all those people fit in there?
I think the only country bigger than America is Russia.
Well, as far as landmass goes, I think Australia is actually bigger than the U.S., but not as far as population-wise,
No.
you know?
Well, Russia's the same.
Yeah.
But there's lots of areas in America, states, that have got more woodland and landmass and people.
Yep.
Well, we're here today actually to talk about the assassination that will be having its anniversary this coming Sunday on the 22nd of November. I think it affected the whole world when John F. Kennedy was murdered.
Yes.
Yes.
You know, before you get into the details or anything, growing up in Ohio at that time, I was give you an example of how big of an impact it had on everybody. Katie and I were out to dinner. We went to Chili's and sat at the bar. And all of a sudden there's this guy says, "Hey, Norm." And I looked over and it was a guy, it was in my, one of the old neighborhood friends. And we started chatting, and the first thing he talked about was, remember we were out playing kick the can, and our parents came and got us and told us to get home immediately, and that was the day Kennedy was shot. And we were told to go in the house, sit down, and watch the TV. My mom was a pretty devout Catholic, and John Kennedy was like her hero. Maybe it was because he was a Catholic, and people relate to that back then with these strong religious ties, but Mom was just an Army brat that grew up, and Kennedy was her president. And people cried in Ohio back in those days.
It was a drawback for him, really, being a Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he had to explain in the base. Well, I don't think he never apologized for being Catholic, but he kept having to explain to people, especially down in Texas and such, that the Pope wasn't going to be president. He was.
Well, he said you're Catholic, you can't fight for your country. So why should I not be a Catholic to be a president to help my country?
Mm-hmm.
Because he wasn't just a Catholic, he was American.
Yeah, he was American. But things were still different back when he was elected. It's not like when Al Smith ran for president and Catholic was still such a dirty word. But people still didn't trust the Catholics a whole lot. And it's mainly because they all figured, well, if he gets in, the Pope will be running this country.
I think it stems from here because, they really pushed the Catholics down, and a monarch cannot be a Catholic, even now.
Yeah.
Got to be Church of England because they are head of the religion, and they couldn't take private office. I believe Tony Blair was a cupboard Catholic, though he denied it. They was still saying, oh, he's Catholic, and it was a bad thing sort of thing. So they're still trying to keep him down, and it's not the Catholics they've got to worry about.
Yeah, well, the way I look at it is Catholics are no sillier than any other people, so...
That's right. They haven't plotted against the monarchy in at least 500-600 years.
Mm-hmm.
But JFK did have to hide the fact that he had bad health.
Yeah, he did. You know, after the assassination, people make a big thing about there wasn't any autopsy performed. You know why there wasn't any autopsy performed?
Well, I heard that there was.
No, Robert Kennedy stopped it.
Yes, but
It was obvious what killed Kennedy, but they didn't want the autopsy because then they'd have to admit how bad Kennedy's health really was. And the family wasn't prepared to do that.
this is why he pushed so hard to be president. He really wanted to be president. And I think if he had have lived and got in for a second term, he would have died in office.
I think he would have too.
He wasn't expecting to live above 39 years old. When he was 29 and he was really ill, he said, I'll give myself another 10 years.
Well, he lived a fast-paced life behind the scenes, don't you think?
Oh, it was very tough.
I always wondered if we had Facebook back then, what would have been posted by the Kennedys. Could you imagine that? We see these pictures over the years of back then when he was at the beach with Marilyn and stuff. That was these pictures surfaced. Can you imagine that? You know, crazy.
Well, he was diagnosed with colitis when he was 17, and that, of course, turned to Addison's. But he did very well with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's all on record. Anybody could have looked it up.
Yeah, but people just didn't do that. I mean, the press was willing to give him passes on so many things, including his health.
Well, they did it with them all, didn't they?
They did back then, yeah.
If you were gay, it didn't get mentioned. Same with Hollywood stars, you know, Rock Hudson.
Yeah, if you were betting Marilyn Monroe, it didn't get mentioned.
You know, we look at Kennedy, and everybody wants to look at Kennedy and say he was just a pig, you know, when he had these relationships like that. Don't you really think that a lot of American businessmen had them kind of relationships back then?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that was just kind of the behind-the-scenes normal, kind of nudging your buddy going, yeah. Took the secretary out. We had a couple cocktails last night. The wife was taking care of the kids. I mean, that was the way. That was like the good old boy network, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying it was right.
I know.
Totally wrong.
But that's the way that it was, yeah.
And it's really sad that kind of stuff went on behind the wife's back. That's got stuck at home all day. And you know, we talk about women going out to the workplace. That changed the whole philosophy of that because then women started doing it, certain women. But I don't know. You know, they talk about values back in those days compared to 2015.
Us being more open about it is a little bit better than sneaking around behind everybody and doing something.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, because now you can't really sneak around. You know, if you just think about your life in general, if you want to have an affair, if you want to cheat on your spouse, people don't realize is everybody knows everybody, number one. You just don't know. You're not privy to it. You go through life and you go, wow. You think back, God, if I did screw around on my wife, boy, that girl would have known and she would have known and he would have known. I would have got busted. So yeah. It's like back in the old days, I don't know what it was that these guys snuck around in these little hotels on these no-name roads.
Because it was a good old boy network who covered for each other, you know?
It was only if they wanted to get rid of him that it came out.
Yeah. Get him out of politics or out of the head of the workplace or whatever, then it came out.
Well, one at worst I've heard was Lyndon B. Johnson. Now, he recorded all his telephone calls when he became president, and the way he spoke to women, I'm sure they put the phone down and got the sick bucket out, especially Jackie. Ugh, horrible man. Some of his phone calls are on YouTube. You can listen to them.
They're probably also in the Internet Archive. I never looked them up, but I looked up Nixon's, and you can find a bunch of the Watergate stuff on the Internet Archives.
Right.
I would imagine LBJs are there, too.
Yeah.
And even Kennedy recorded some of his conversations.
Yes, he did. He blasted them because he learned his news from reading newspaper. And a newspaper plunked on his desk, and it got this picture of this bed where Jackie was going to have a baby in this room at this Air Force base, and there was a soldier stood by the bed, and they'd let the newspaper in, and they took photographs, and there was a massive settee, and they'd said how much it cost, and that was it. He got on the phone. Who told you to spend that much money? We don't need that goddamn sofa. You can send it back. Send it back today. Your budget's going to be cut now if you can spend money like that.
The thing is, though, if Kennedy didn't get assassinated, would we be talking about Kennedy's affair with Marilyn Monroe? Would it have been a big deal? Would we even know about it? You know?
Oh, we would have known about it.
I think we would have known about it, but it may not have been such a big deal because, I mean, we don't talk about Roosevelt's mistress.
And Johnson had a couple of mistresses.
And even Eisenhower supposedly had some mistresses, but, you know, we don't really talk about that.
And these are our leaders of our country.
And these are the leaders of our country, yeah.
So, why was everybody upset about Bill Clinton?
I don't know.
Because it wasn't Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah, really.
In case it was the girl next door, right?
Yeah. If it had been somebody high up, an actress.
But Marilyn, if they ever had an affair or not, nobody really knows for certain, but Marilyn wouldn't have been the only one with Kennedy.
Oh, no. He was linked with Betty Grable, Sophia Loren.
Yeah, but there were a few even outside of movie stars and such that he had.
Oh, yeah. One of his interns. Jackie found a pair of knickers in the bed, and she said, can you give these back to who they belong to, because they're not my size.
Wow. You got to be some kind of a woman to stay with a man. Was it because he was president that she stayed with him?
She got a big paycheck. She was going to leave him, and Joe, his dad, said you can't ruin his career by leaving him.
There's the other part is, who did John Kennedy have for his role model, you know, for how a husband and man is supposed to act, but his father.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, all sons were the same, weren't they?
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't just John that womanized. Passed them on.
Yeah, they passed that one on, yeah.
Growing up, I never thought of any other presidents, either after Kennedy or before, because I was too young probably, but he was put on a pedestal. Kennedy was put on a pedestal after he was shot.
Yeah.
Maybe I didn't pay attention prior to him being shot, to maybe he was already on that pedestal. Maybe he was a very unique president, and that's why these older generation people, my mother's age, just appreciated the man.
He was a very, very good speech maker. He was very charismatic, and he brought hope to the country.
That was probably the best thing that he did, was he gave us such a feeling of hope and looking forward to the future. Eisenhower wasn't a bad president, but he really wanted to cultivate that image of status quo, everything staying like it's supposed to. And, well, Nixon was Nixon, you know, but Kennedy came along and it was, no, we can be so much better. We've got the chance to be so much better.
It was a major loss, because you wouldn't have had the Korean War. The Bay of Pigs was a fiasco, not by Kennedy. He inherited it. And the problem was, you know, he was raw. He went in as president. He inherited this problem with Fidel Castro. And they said, well, Eisenhower sorted this out. This is what we were going to do. And he just went ahead with him. He took advice.
He was such a new president and all that he just went along with it, and he ended up regretting that one.
That's why he pulled away from the military, and he wasn't going to listen to what they said he'd listen to them, but then he'd make the decision, not them.
Yeah.
He turned more to Bobby, because, I mean, we would have had World War III if it wasn't for Bobby Kennedy, because they said, oh, they're getting nuclear warheads, they're not ready, let's get in there before they get ready. Well, actually, they were ready. Those bombs were armed, ready to go. And Bobby said, well, wait a minute, if we go into Cuba, isn't that the same as what happened
At
in
Pearl
Pearl
Harbor.
Harbor. And of course that hit home with Jack, and he said, we're not doing it. And then he found out that those nuclear warheads were armed.
What's funny is I just get in my email, I belong to the Carnival Cruise. For $1,700, I can get a small inside room for a 7-day cruise to Cuba.
You can go and buy a second-hand car.
I don't think the younger generation realizes how big of a deal.
Yeah, I know.
My grandfather would have been one of the first guys on that ship because my grandfather loved to travel. He loved the Hawaii. He loved Don Ho was one of his heroes. He personally went to concerts and personally knew the man. He was there when Bobby Kennedy got shot, and he shut his show down. People were crying. But that was my grandfather. But my grandfather would have loved to go to Cuba. Personally, I don't know if I could go there. I think there's a lot of unknowns right now as far as safety, in my opinion. Would you go? Any of you guys go?
I don't know.
I spoke to people in Cuba in chat rooms, and yeah, I'd go.
Would you?
Yeah.
Well, I'm like Norm because I was raised during all that time and such. It's like, wait a minute, Cuba. Yeah, that one could be a trouble spot.
Would you have to smoke all your cigars before you came home?
Well, you kind of wonder if the quality of the cigars are even the same back when they were supposed to be these Cuban cigars, you know.
Yes, they are, because they underground them into America, but I mean, Europe's always had them.
Yeah, I always liked John Kennedy going out and buying or sending his people out to buy up 1,000 Cuban cigars just before he declared the embargo.
Yes.
That's Kennedy, you know.
We are all very lucky that, see, I was born in 59, so you guys realize I might not have seen my teens if there was a different outcome on that, because
Yeah.
think about what would have happened 90 miles off the coast of Florida, where they could have reached, how far up north.
Yeah, they could have gotten us all. I was born in 1960. I do not have any memories of the missile crisis, but Mom and Dad have both told us that they had to sit there and wonder what was the use of bringing in 3 kids into this world when it was about to end.
Yeah. I mean, some people might disagree with this comment, but I don't think we've ever been that close since.
No, I don't think we have.
I think if it had been any other president that had been in power, you wouldn't be here.
Can you imagine if Nixon had won and gotten in?
Or even Johnson.
Yeah, because he was one that he would have just gone off the deep end real fast.
Yes. You're very lucky that it was Kennedy. I think Eisenhower would have pushed the button as well.
Eisenhower, I don't know about, because Eisenhower had, he was military. He'd seen what war could do. So Eisenhower, I don't know. He threatened China at the end of the Korean War to get them to sit down at the peace table and such, but I don't know how much of that was bluff and how much of it wasn't,
I think Kennedy was the same. He'd seen war and he didn't want to see it again.
Mm-hmm.
And his health was bad. Now, because people take steroids, and you can tell when somebody's on steroids.
Yeah.
And you look at him and you think, yes, he was on steroids. His face was quite puffy, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And he'd put on a lot of weight, which he'd always struggled to do throughout his life. So do you think that Oswald was one of the shooters or the lone shooter?
Yeah, I think he was the lone shooter.
I've looked and it's just quite impossible that he could shoot off. Now,
He was listed as a marksman. He would have gone on to be a sniper if he'd stayed in the Marines.
no, he wouldn't. He just scraped through.
No, go look at the real records. He was very good with a rifle.
Not with the rifle he used.
I think he was lucky. Lucky is a misnomer, but I think our luck was just out at the moment. It's like when Lincoln was shot. He was also surrounded by soldiers, but Booth got through and shot him.
Yeah,
right?
that was close range.
Yeah, that was, because he just had that Derringer, but he still was able to get through, you know. And the other attacks that night, for one reason or another, didn't work. But just our luck was out, and Lincoln took the hit.
But it didn't kill him straight out either.
But there was no chance he was going to survive.
No, well, not in that day and age, because they just didn't have the
No,
medical.
well, even the doctor, there was a doctor in the audience, and he came up to the booth to look at Lincoln, and the guy had spent time in the Army. He knew a fatal wound when he saw it. He told them there and on the spot, this is a fatal wound. It was pretty obvious from the get-go Lincoln was doomed.
A lot of people think that he was shot in the theatre and he died there, but he was actually taken across the road to a house where he lingered for, was it 3 days?
No, it was a number of hours. He died before dawn the next day.
I thought it was longer than that.
No. But he lingered for a few hours, but I mean, there was no hope. A lot of people also think Lincoln got shot in the back of the head. That's not true. If you go through and really look at the records, entered his skull more toward the left-hand side. Chances are he had turned his head and saw the gun.
Well, you know, with new technology and everything, they've checked the Zapruder film, and they found out that some of the images are missing, so that has to be thrown out. But they have got a radio mic that was open on one of the motorbikes, and they've listened to that, and they've been able to isolate it down, and they say there was 4 shots.
I have heard that recording, and I have read up on that recording, and for everybody who said there was 4 shots, there's always somebody going, no, that's an echo of one. That there were only 3 shots.
Yeah, there was 2 very close together. But why wasn't the echoes of the other 2 shots then, and why aren't they saying there's 6?
Acoustics can do strange things. Have you ever read the battle reports from the Civil War where one general was downfield and was listening for the beginning of the battle and never heard it?
We've got trains going along to the south of us, but sometimes they sound like they're coming from the north.
Yeah.
You know, it's your weather conditions and things like that.
When the Beatles were recording, the way EMI had set up the air conditioner, all the sound was taken out the air conditioner and sent upward. It was to help keep the noise down. And you couldn't hear it right outside the building, but this college just a few miles away, they said that people would group on the yards and listen to the Beatles recording because they could hear them perfectly.
I've not heard that one.
Acoustics can do strange things.
I'm still not sure. I still think there was probably 4 bullets shot. And I'm not able to work out how someone could shoot from a 6th floor building when Kennedy was shot in the back. They're trying to make out that it was shot in the back of the neck, but when you see it was shot in the back, near his left shoulder blade, and then it had to go up out through his throat. That was the first bullet that hit him.
Yeah.
So how could it go up if somebody was shooting from down?
Deflected off a bone. I mean, that happens all the time. That stuff doesn't line up completely. Baron Reichoff and his deadly wound didn't go through in a straight line and through his body either.
It was a magic bullet, because then it came out of his throat and it hit Conley in front in 2 places. And I've talked to people that have got, that know about these guns, and, they say that it won't go that far. They'll go in deep, but that was a very special bullet.
I look at it this way. I have knowledge of reloading shells, and I would have thought that if it is just the one bullet that did what it did, it could have been a very high-powered made bullet for that particular shooting.
Well, they've got the bullet.
I mean, I don't think he just took it out of a box at random and put a bullet in the gun. I think maybe the government or whoever was involved way back said, you must use these shells. You must use these bullets. Maybe it was some kind of new technology. Maybe it was somebody's idea of a new type of bullet. I don't know if anybody's investigated the bullet itself. How much powder was in the shell? Do they have the shell that actual bullet come out of the actual brass?
Yes. It was in the sixth floor building. There was
Okay, so but I guess what they would have to figure out is how much powder was in that. What was he shooting? You know, what was the primer in the shell? All these little things that would make a difference of when you say a magic bullet bouncing here. So it bounced off the bone, then it went in a different direction, came back up through the leg or something, and then it ended up hitting a dash or something.
It went through his Kennedy shoulder, out just under his Adam's apple, into Connolly's back, and into his wrist.
To me, it's irrelevant what it actually technically went through. It's so powerful, it could have done anything. I mean, it really could have. It wasn't just a normal bullet. Let's just put it that way. It would have been a specialty bullet, in my opinion.
It was a brass bullet.
Well, it would have been definitely charged a little different than a normal shooting because it was going to be intended to kill him. I mean, you wouldn't put a generic shell in a bullet if you're going out there to shoot a 9,000-pound bear. You know, you're going out to get this or Bigfoot. You know what I'm saying? You would have a specific reason to have a specialty bullet made for a specific shooting. You know, so they got the bullet. We don't know what kind of gunpowder was in it. We don't know who made it.
Well, we found a bullet in the hospital on the trolley, not the one that Conley was on, but the next one, and they said it must have fallen out of him.
Was there anything else put in that gunpowder chamber that could have
It was a high-powered rifle.
It was an Italian rifle that's called the enemy's friend because it wasn't very accurate. It didn't kill many people in the war.
Then I would say you'd have to look at the bullet. The bullet had to be something that fit in that gun that was not normally in that gun for a specific shooting. And we had technology back then on that. There was experts out there. If you're going to shoot somebody, you're not going to use a .22. Somebody tells me right now, hey, Norm, you're going to go shoot this guy. You're going to kill the president. They're going to give me a weapon that's going to do the job, don't you think?
Well, he ordered it online. They've got the records for that. That he bought it from a magazine.
It wasn't online.
No, not online. Sorry. He would have bought it online if it were today, but they had records that he had ordered it from a catalogue. He could have got one more expensive, but it was a cheaper gun.
And by the way, Governor Conley, let's see, it penetrated his back just below his right armpit, exited his chest just below his right nipple, and he'd had his arm up, waving, and was in the process of turning around when it hit. So it was able to enter his arm just above his right wrist.
It went through all those things.
Yeah, it did. It had a hell of a force behind it.
Either that,
as far as they know, that was the first one.
I went to Google Maps Road View, and I went to the spot, and I looked round at the book depository, and it is a hell of a long way.
Yeah, it is, but it doesn't mean that it couldn't be done.
Looking at what the doctors said when Kennedy arrived there and they tried to save his life, they said that the bullet wound was an entry wound at the front and the bullet came out of the back. Now, sitting on that road and looking round, the only place that I could see where someone would be able to shoot Kennedy through the throat and it come out through his back, and it would be the correct alignment for the bullet, it would be going down. Next to the bridge on the left-hand side of the road is some trees. Now, there was a man stood by the bridge, and I believe that somebody shot from the 6th floor and shot at that man, and they just missed him, and he saw the bullet, it whizzed past him. He dived for cover, and that was your first shot. And then
Possibly, yeah.
they was clearing him, get out of the way, we don't want you to see the assassin, and somebody shot from there. I believe the killing shot came from the grassy knoll, and that's where everybody ran to, and the only person that was there was a Secret Service man. That's what he claimed to be, and the Secret Service said there was not one of their men there. And there was some very strange things happening because Lyndon B. Johnson was sat there listening to a radio, and he suddenly ducked. They've looked at the pictures of the car. He ducked before the first bullet was shot, and he was listening to a radio, and in front of the sign, you can't see it on the Zapruder film, there's a man sat listening to a radio, and another man stood next to him that actually opens and closes an umbrella twice.
What happened prior to this visit to Dallas, that prior week?
Oh, God.
I mean, what happened in Washington? What happened in political arena? What did Kennedy do or didn't do?
Well, he upset a lot of people with the Bay of Pigs. He sacked Alan Dulles from the CIA, and he was going to disband the CIA, and he was going to give the money back to the country. I mean, I'm absolutely shocked that you don't have your own mint.
Well, I mean, because I wonder, he visited other places that you just kind of wonder why Dallas, why then, unless he really got under the skin of certain people, the wrong people.
I just don't think so. I think it was Oswald for his own reasons, and he was the lone shooter.
Well, Jesse Ventura's tried to get Lee Harvey Oswald's tax return papers, and they've sealed them for national security.
He claims that he's tried to get them.
Other people have tried to get them as well, yeah. You can try if you want, but they're sealed for national security. Why would anyone want to seal somebody's tax returns? It can only be that there's something in there that shows that he worked for the CIA or the FBI. Once those tax returns are made public, there's a paper trail.
But here's the thing. If he was really on the payroll, don't you think steps would have been taken to hide that? If somebody was paying me with this federal government right now, you think I'm going to put that on my taxes?
Yes, because you're frightened at IRS.
But wait a minute. If I was being paid by the federal government right now, undercover, under nobody's knowledge, I wouldn't have to worry about filing taxes because they would take care of me.
Yeah.
To put it on your taxes, if that's what you're stating, that you think that them taxes show a payment from the federal government, I think that stuff wasn't even taxable anyhow.
Oh, well, I think if they were going to do that, they would have just made it a cash payment, and he wouldn't have to declare it.
Right. I mean, because that would give it away. That'd be no different than a guy going to a motel room with his girlfriend and using his family charge card.
Yeah.
And then his wife opens the envelope next month and says, "Oh, I see you stayed at the Holiday Inn the other night." I mean, unless they were just stupid and that was somebody's mistake. But you really think that the guy filed taxes? I know guys that don't file taxes today.
Well, if he was still in the army under army pay when he was in Russia as well.
It might have been on his behalf. Somebody could have filed on his behalf, I would imagine. I don't know how all that worked back in those days.
Yeah, really, because if he was still in Russia, you think he'd really file taxes here?
I think they're exempt. They're exempt while they're serving. Granted, somewhere down the line they would have had to show some kind of income, but I think some of that stuff might have been automated back then. I don't know. Diane, not knowing our tax system here that as well as we do.
You're right, Diane. It would have made a paper trail, and that would be the last thing you wanted to do.
Right. Nobody would have wanted to do that if that's the case.
Well, I think there must be something in there prior to him going to Russia, which I believe he was sent, because they did send people to Russia to pretend to be ready to leave the country. And if he was in the pay of the CIA, he would be getting more money than he would if he was just a private in the army.
I understand your viewpoint on that, but here's what I would say. I would say those things are sealed for one other reason. I think they're sealed because the government made it a false return. I think there's things in there that people are going to question, like you are going to say, well, wait a minute, what do you mean he had income from where? that couldn't have been because he was here. I think that they've screwed up something. Somebody did up high, and it's not actually hiding who was paying him, but it's a screw up. Somebody made a mistake, and it's not going to make sense in this whole big picture if it's uncovered. It's almost unheard of that they would keep those sealed today.
I'm not kidding. I'm looking at an article about it. They got unsealed in 1967.
Lee Harvey Oswald's
Tax returns.
are unsealed.
It was done by accident, but they've been unsealed since 1967.
So why are they saying that they can't send them because they're sealed?
Maybe there's
Or Ventura is looking to just get a little publicity, you know?
yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, he's the guy that sued the American Sniper family because he was mentioned in a book. Remember that deal? And he won. I just saw that movie, American Sniper. That's the only reason I mentioned that. It was a very good movie. I don't know if it's how accurate it was portrayed of his life, but I could tell you right now I have a little more respect for people over there in a sniper situation.
Now, I can believe that the CIA was involved in sending Oswald to Russia as a spy, and Oswald probably, you know, and he was the type of person, he probably would have gone for the thrill of it.
But he didn't have the money to get to Russia, what he had in his bank account. And when he came back, they gave him money. Normally, if someone came from Russia, as he did with his wife, she would have been questioned. They knew exactly who she was. They knew her uncle was one of the top KGB. You know, she'd grown up with KGB. And they didn't question her. They just let her go.
But I also think that Oswald was slightly unhinged, let's put it politely.
Oh, he got a temper.
Yeah, and I think he came up with the idea of killing Kennedy, revenge or whatever, but he did it all on his own.
I don't think he did, because they couldn't find a fingerprint or a thumbprint. There was no prints on the gun, and then suddenly the FBI took them and, oh, we found a palm print, and it belongs to Lee Harvey Oswald. He'd been shot by that time, and he was at the mortuary. They'd already got him prepared, and they went in and asked the man to leave. And when he went back in, he said they'd got black ink on his hands. They'd printed him. And then suddenly found this palm print on the gun. The only good thing that the Dallas police did was give him the tests, and he got residue on his hands, but it was so minute he could have got it from the books. And there was nothing on his cheeks.
You mean like gunpowder residue or something?
Yes, they tested his hands, which you can pick that sort of stuff up from books. And there was nothing on his cheeks at all.
Okay.
All right.
Where does that lead from there? Keep going then, Diane. What do you believe?
Well, he would have had to have residue on his cheek if he was looking through the sight of the gun.
So you're saying he didn't shoot the gun at all?
I believe he was where he said he was. 2 minutes after the shooting, a police officer went into the building, and he was there having a can of Coke or something. That's where he was when they first saw him. And he wasn't out of breath or anything. He looked quite normal.
So say what Keenan says, that he was planning to do this, and you're thinking that somebody...
Well, you know, he is suspected of having taken a shot. You guys know who General Walker was?
Yes.
Okay, he is suspected of having taken a shot at General Walker about a week before the Kennedy assassination. The bullet was so mangled, I don't remember if it hit Walker or not, but the bullet was so mangled they couldn't make a positive identification off of it.
No, it didn't hit him. It didn't hit Walker, but they do say that was staged.
See, you were saying what was happening in, like, Dallas. Well, there were a lot of right-wingers. They basically were like Trump is today. And Walker was one of the worst ones. And they had been threatening to do all sorts of things to Kennedy when he came. And then somebody actually shot Kennedy, you know?
Well, that would mean that Oswald was on Walker's side then.
No, not necessarily. It could be that Oswald was on his own agenda.
Well, he also was giving out leaflets, Fair Play for Cuba Committee.
Yeah.
He did a couple of radio shows, and they did put him under pressure on the second one because he was involved in a fight with one of the Cuban exiles, and the reason wasn't because he was handing out pamphlets, it's because he'd been anti-Castro, and then suddenly they found him in the street handing out leaflets pro-Castro.
I don't know about Oswald being anti-Castro.
He'd been to meetings. This is why this exiled Cuban saw him in the street, and they ended up fighting, and Oswald got arrested because he'd been to meetings anti-Castro.
I know he got into a fight, I think it was in New Orleans.
That's right, yes.
Handing out, because he was handing out leaflets. I don't know about the anti-Castro part, though. Because I grew up in Chicago, I've grown up hearing that it was a conspiracy and it was the mafia. And, what was that guy's name?
What, you mean
But
Sam Giancana?
Yes, that's it. Sam Giancana. You know, I met him once.
Did you? They say he was a really nice man.
I'm not going to claim having a friendship with him or anything, but I met him, and he told me a different name, that he was an Italian businessman, which did actually bring up thoughts in my head, but that's because I was growing up in Chicago at the time, and Italian businessmen are always suspect. But later on, I was flipping through a book, Bad Men and Bloodletters, and there he was, Sam Giancana. It's like, oh my God. There was a picture of him and everything. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah, he shared women with John Kennedy.
Yeah. Anyway, it was supposedly, I've often heard that it was him who was behind it all, but I don't think so. I'm certain that he wanted to, because of Marilyn Monroe and everything.
He did brag off that it was him that killed Marilyn Monroe.
Because of the Bay of Pigs and Marilyn Monroe and everything, because there is an old mafia thing, somebody welches on a deal, you get his gun and his girl. But I don't think so. I think Oswald acted alone, and just our luck was out, I know it's not a popular thing to say, and don't want to believe it. They'd rather see the big conspiracy behind it all, because they just don't want to think that our luck was out.
I tried to look at Oswald being the sole culprit, and it just doesn't pan out. How would he get downstairs with nobody seeing him?
Because everybody was looking out, going in to see what was going on in the street.
There was people on the stairs because he was leaving the building.
Yeah, and a few people saw him.
No one saw him on the stairs.
If I remember right, somebody saw him as he was leaving, but just didn't pay any attention to it.
That's right. He was leaving the building, but when they went into the building, it was actually in the lunchroom on the second floor.
Well, he may have been. He may have just brazened his way out of it. But, I mean, when they arrested him in a movie theater.
Yes, that's right. He went home to...
Dump the rifle. No, because they found the rifle. He had dumped the rifle at the site.
That is another thing where an officer said they found a different rifle. One that was actually more accurate.
People have said they found a different rifle. People have said that it was a Mauser.
That's right, yes.
And but you go through and look at the films and everything, and no, it's that Italian rifle.
Yes. I don't know if that was found before those films were being took or what, but they'd picked up the shells and then put them back down before they was photographed.
Yeah, they needed to get the photographs of them in place.
And they didn't.
Right.
And there was fingerprints all over the place, and they didn't find any of Lee Harvey Oswald's, but they did find one that belonged to the henchman of Lyndon B. Johnson.
No, they have found an unrecognizable print on the rifle. They don't know whose, because it's not so uncommon not to find usable prints anywhere at a crime scene.
They've linked it to the henchman of Lyndon B. Johnson. This fingerprint expert, it said it's 95% positive.
I haven't seen anything like that.
Let me ask this. Is anybody alive, conspiracy or no conspiracy, is anybody alive that was involved with this at any level?
Yes.
There's probably still a few running around. I don't know
So,
about Secret Service agents who were there,
There's quite a few of the Service agents still
but I would
alive.
imagine that they could still be alive, yeah.
The man that took Lee Harvey Oswald to work, he is still around, and he claims that a lot of his evidence to the Warren Commission was suppressed.
okay, so a lot of these guys might know something, but then they'd say, well, it's coming from an 80 or 90-year-old man. He doesn't know what he's saying. I guess what I'm saying is there's always going to be, when you say the eyewitnesses say they never saw this or that, I guess my point on that is if you take us three right here in this conversation and put us on a street corner and there was an accident with one car, and you take each three of us and put us in a room and we discuss it with a police officer, we'd have three different stories.
Yeah.
We'd just sit there and argue and say, that's not what I saw. And you'd say, no, that's what happened. I saw it. We all saw it at the same time, but we all have different mind thoughts about it.
You know, they've done this type of scenario with not the assassination, but they've done different things where they staged a crime scene and then went around and asked the people what happened. And yeah, they come away with different stories.
I guess what Diane's saying, she's done a lot of research on this, and I know you have, and I'll be honest, I never really researched it. Just I'm going with what I've heard over the years of my life. Every 10 years or so, you hear a different comes out of the closet. You know, oh well, you know, now we're looking at it different. You see it on the news. The news will run a special report on the Kennedys because the technology is changing, and people are coming up with these programs and redoing it. They get the film crews out there. I'm sure they've done that. Don't know when they did it, but I know they've done it. Reenacted the whole thing.
Yeah.
And it couldn't have happened the way that it happened. And the reasons people are digging in and why this, why that, I don't know if we'll ever know what really happened. What if there was no film on it? Maybe the film screwed it up worse than it really is.
There was more than one film, but they got confiscated.
There's supposedly a second film floating around, but nobody has seen it.
Were these films
There was more than one film shot on that day, but as far as they know, only Zapruder's shows the actual assassination.
Are this technology of films even worth trying to analyze with the technology that we were way behind back in those days? I mean, we're talking little
we're talking
Super
about
8.
frames missing. No, it wasn't even Super 8. It was regular 8.
Okay, so there could have been something clipped
that
out.
stuff was really brittle. And it gets more brittle over the years.
Right. But what I'm saying is, could somebody within the government have changed something in those films? Did they have access to them films?
Yes, they did.
It was in the National Archives.
It was loaned to Life magazine.
But the people that were involved back then, the FBI and the people that were investigating the actual deal when it happened, months after it happened, if there was a conspiracy within the federal government or other people's, don't you think that they could have covered it up even further?
Yeah.
They did a very bad job about it, but
of course,
people that claimed that, you know, they did see things died. Witnesses,
it happens to us all.
not by shooting. I mean, somebody committed suicide by shooting themselves in the back.
Show me the proof.
There was a man, he was shot in the back.
Show me
They said it
the
was
proof.
suicide. I've got a list of all the people they claim have died through association, and the murders are unbelievable.
Show me the money.
Yeah, show me the money. Show me the proof.
I love you. That was a great clip.
Yeah.
I mean, Jack Ruby, who shot Lee Harvey Oswald.
That is the biggest piece of proof that it was the mafia, because he was tied in with the mafia.
He was tied in with everybody, though, wasn't
Yeah, well, he was an owner of a strip club, and it was already suspected for having laundered money through it.
Wait a minute now. Back in those days, who wasn't tied with the mob that had anything going on? There was some big boys in this area where I grew up. Was anybody in business in Chicago when you grew up, Keenan, that wasn't involved with the mob?
Listen, my mom worked for a few years at a Montgomery Ward catalog store.
I think they were owned by the mob.
Hang on. One time she got notification, jury duty. And she was telling her boss about it, and she told her boss, I really don't want to do this. And her boss was like, well, okay. She goes down, she reports in, the judge looks at her and goes, yes, Mrs. Powell, you've been excused.
Okay.
Now tell me that boss from the Montgomery Ward catalog store didn't know someone who could get that done.
Sure, there was favors.
Oh, yeah. They were probably laundering money through that Montgomery Ward store.
Sure they were.
Don't suspect my mother.
Your mother was probably one of the biggest mobsters, and you don't even know it. You're the son.
Yeah, really. But, yeah, tell me that this guy, this store owner, little Montgomery Ward catalog store, didn't have some connection someplace where he could pull and get her off jury duty. Mom tells us this story at home, and we're like, Mom, what's the last name of your boss?
Perhaps he rang up and said, she's linked at mafia.
Well, I also know I've had this friend. She was 2 or 3 years older than me, but we went out riding in her car one day, and she got pulled over by Chicago police. Not one of the suburbs, Chicago PD, and he's writing her up a speeding ticket or whatever it was she was supposed to have done. But he asked to see her ID, and she looks at it, and he goes, "Are you Don Ciano's daughter?" And she said yes, and the cop tore the ticket up. And I mean, I'm sitting there looking at Jenny and going, "What does your father do for a living?" "He's in real estate." And I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, families didn't know, did they?
Yeah, families don't always know.
But I know that our hour's up. It's been very interesting.
Yes, it has been. I don't think we got anything settled, but it has been interesting.
I don't think anything will ever be settled. It's been
I don't
52
think
years.
So. Yeah, I don't think so either. I think there will always be room for doubt and debate on both sides of the line.
So where can we find you?
You can find me at tangentfilmsco.com. That is my site for the filmmaking enterprise, and you can also find me on Facebook. Just make certain you choose. I never thought I'd have to say this, but just make certain you choose the correct Keenan Powell.
Oh, you mean there's a famous one out there?
I like to term her my evil twin, which I know aggravates her to no end, but she's an accident lawyer up in Alaska.
Oh, really? I'm going to find out if she's related to the mobsters.
She probably knows a few.
She probably knows Sarah Palin. Sarah Palin, I think, is involved in that.
No, she absolutely abhors Sarah Palin. I can tell you that one.
Well, I hope our listeners have been a little bit more enlightened, and it'll make you want to go out there and look up some of these interesting facts about the assassination, Lee Harvey Oswald, and we barely touched on J.D. Tippit.
We didn't touch on J.D. Tippit at all.
No, we didn't. He was shot half an hour before, and it all came that...
No, he was shot after.
Sorry, he was shot half an hour after Kennedy.
Yeah.
They linked Oswald to killing him to get him to be killing the president.
They had more eyewitnesses to Oswald shooting Tippit, because, I mean, that's how the cops found them, is they were just asking people, and they're like, yeah, I saw him, he went that way. And finally tracked him down to the movie theater.
I'm going to debate on you on that one as well after we've closed the show. Thank you for listening, and we will be back.
Good night, everyone.
Yes, we will be back same time, same place next week, so please join us then.
Bye.